everybody. Hope everybody's doing great. Rosanna and John Case. Anita is away. She is on the beach in Cuba, hanging out, drinking mojitos, and having a great time, on the Revolutionary Island. And but she'll be back next week. And good morning to you, Scott. Well, John Case, big discussion yesterday in the country and in the press on the debt ceiling. And I gotta tell you, John, whenever I hear debt ceiling, debt limit, my eyes kind of blur over, and I get this like dissonant feel. I don't know what the heck they're talking about. What is the debt ceiling? Number one, and
The
why is it important?
every right, every year we end up having to approve the ability of the government to borrow additional money. Currently, there's a $30 trillion deficit, ultimate debt, right now, and so the Republicans have used it for the past couple of decades, basically, as a bargaining chip to cut their taxes, which is always their ultimate goal, and whatever goes through Congress. But of course, it's also an opportunity to generate a political crisis. And so far, as Senator Manchin said today on Bloomberg, it's always happened that after everybody wrestles around in the mud, that you come up with an agreement to extend the debt limit, which means that the government can now continue to borrow money up to another limit, until you reach that limit. And right
Why
now,
does the
we've reached
government need to borrow money?
because it spends more than it gets in income. And it has the ability to
Okay.
do that. Very important to be able to do that. As long as you can print your own currency, it's very important to be able to do that, to be able to recover from recessions or pandemics, or to raise money
But
for.
the last time they balanced the budget was under Clinton. So to keep, you know, doing this deficit spending thing, so I'm mystified.
Why they have to borrow money? Well,
Well, I
because they don't
mean,
taxes. I mean, yeah, I think you're betting on the future. When you borrow money, you're saying, I'm going to do something with the money that's going to make it worth more in the future. And matter of fact, sufficiently more so that it will pay itself back, like the bridge between St. Paul and Minneapolis. Okay. When it was originally built, it cost a certain amount of money, probably a lot of money. But the value it created down the road was vaster than, the money borrowed or the bonds sold, loans basically, to finance it.
I see. Okay, so they're using it as a bargaining chip
Yeah,
to cut what? Social Security,
yeah.
Medicaid,
I think the Republicans
military
have
budget. Are they going to cut the military budget?
no, they're going to cut everything else but the military budget. They made that very clear. Okay, so that means Social Security is on the Highway Trust Fund is on the mat. Because right now, for example, the Highway Trust Fund is financed by taxes on gasoline. But if the country goes to electric vehicles, that income that basically sustains the Highway Trust Fund will be gone. Same thing with Medicare. Okay, so all these trust funds are at risk. Uh, in this bargaining that's going on. But I think there's another scenario you ought to be careful about, because an opportunity to bring the country to default would compel the president to declare a national emergency, and if he had to do that, and to do that would also then set the precedent for declaring national emergencies, and you would have a possible very serious crisis. And it's clear that some of the Republicans want that to happen. They want insurrection stage 2 to take place. Whether they got it planned for now or not, it's not clear to me.
So, have this ever happened before? Has the government ever defaulted?
No, never.
So there was an article in The Nation by John Kenneth Galbraith, who's an economist, and the point he made was really interesting, which is that the government doesn't borrow to pay existing obligations. Like those have to be paid. That's a matter of law, right? Um, the bills have to be paid. The government can print money to do that. The government's not like a private citizen. So if um, if my car payment is due or whatever, and I have to um, make it or get my car repossessed, I can't print my own money. I got to get the money somehow. The government can um,
Well,
print
you
money.
could. It's called counterfeiting.
Yeah, well, short of that, I can't legally print my own money. Uh, but what Galbraith suggests in this article is that the main um, point of borrowing and of obsessing about the credit rating of the United States and its bonds and all of that is to make sure that investors have a safe dollar denominated investment product to direct their money into. So this is really, it sounds like in his reading, much more about the interests of investors than about the interests of the people of the United States, and the country keeping the lights on or whatever. Though obviously it is being used as a bargaining chip.
So, Rosanna, should Biden and them negotiate, you know, tinkering with Social Security or Medicaid in order to prevent the worst case scenario that Comrade Case just put forward, a default, national
No,
emergency, and then
of
insurrection?
course not. I think the people need to demand that military budget be cut. It's way too high for what it's worth or for what it's used for, and it doesn't keep us safe. It doesn't even provide the livable means for the troops. So so no, I think that we need to demand to cut that military budget and leave Social Security and Medicare alone, and other services.
And why should it always be the people, the working class, who has to
Pay
tremble
the price. Right.
when this question of the debt ceiling comes up? Why should it be our Social Security and our Medicare and our Medicaid and our highways and all that stuff? Let the rich tremble for once. Let them worry about, oh, am I going to be able to recoup my investment? Am I going to make a profit on this? Oh, am I going to, is the government uh, flow of largesse into my business going to keep coming? Let them worry. It's their
Well,
turn.
it's
We've
a
worried about.
bourgeois world. That's why, and there's no mass movement on the other side to push pressure on them to stop. I mean, what's Manchin gonna do? And he's one of those wishy-washy. He's more washy than wishy. But on almost every question, is he gonna propose some kind? They got that problem solvers caucus in the
Oh, I think,
Senate. Are they,
yeah,
John?
I think
What are they gonna do?
Manchin's got he's already got a committee going of Republicans and Democrats, quote unquote, bipartisan. He's going to, find out what they're going to do about the trust funds. Now, Manchin's, it's hard to, he doesn't usually lie, by the way. Uh, but he is in the pocket of the energy company, so he's going to use his ability to cut a deal if he has any ability of that left. It's going to be on the energy lines. He's going to promote nuclear energy, and he's going to promote the sale of natural gas out of the state of West Virginia. He had a big meeting with Bill Gates last week in the state to spend billions of dollars on the possible conversion of coal power plants to nuclear plants. Um, so that's the direction that he's going as chair of the Energy Committee as well. He says he says there's no way that the Republicans are going to actually have a default, but that wasn't what I heard in the debate over the speaker last week. Um, so I think it's too early to
I,
tell.
I don't know how you can have bipartisanship with these fascists that are running the
Exactly.
House of Representatives now. I mean, you got a fascist clique that is now they got McCarthy, freaking straitjacket, and it's which is appropriate because that Republican caucus, House, the Republican conference, whatever the heck you call it, is the cuckoo nest, you know. So that they got the speaker in a straitjacket and in a right wing insane asylum is very appropriate. Well, let's see how it goes, but I will hope that the lessons of developing mass public pressure, we keep saying it over and over and over, somebody picks it up and runs with it, because without that, you can't keep these debates. We said at the National Committee meeting, Rosanna, last week, you can't keep these debates confined between elite groups inside the Beltway. It's ridiculous. Rosanna.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking also that, if people don't want to touch the military budget, then let's demand that that the rich pay their fair share of taxes. That would solve a lot of problems too. They don't pay their fair share of taxes. So if people don't want to touch the military budget, well, let's demand that the rich pay their fair share of taxes, which they don't.
And all of this is you're absolutely right. And all of this is taking place, by the way, within the context of what appears to be a looming recession. Recession is coming. So they say. We'll see if it
Well,
happens. And you don't agree, Case?
no, it's the Federal Reserve wants to have a recession, and it's determined to have one. And that represents probably a significant section of Wall Street that because the cause of the inflation is not the cause of the inflation is a supply chain crisis that started in the pandemic and got aggravated by the Cold War and the war in Ukraine, and then aggravated again by monopoly. Anytime inflation goes up, monopoly has the perfect ability to protect itself because people got no place else to buy but them, and they can raise the price until actually people just can't afford to buy it at all, and it starts to fall off. So there's like a 25% surcharge on inflation just from monopolization that takes place. But yeah, so the Fed's going to cause a recession. In other words, force people to be laid off, raise interest rates high enough so people get laid off and they stop buying. But the problem is if it's really underlying a supply side problem, there's not enough goods being produced. Okay, if that's the real problem, well then laying people off they won't kill the inflation. If supply is short of demand, how far you got to push the band down before you get down to 2% inflation? You're talking about not a light recession, but probably a longer one. So that's what's happened. I think by itself we might not have one if you had if you weren't so interested, you were willing to take on the monopolies a little bit and stop the wars a little bit. Well then, yeah, I think you could probably do it without a recession. But the Fed has no other means besides interest rates, really. And so there you go. It's a problem ahead.
So I guess my question would be then, thinking in terms of usual capitalist crises, the standard schema that's laid out in Marx is overproduction, right? Things too much gets produced, the value can't be realized, and the value then has to be destroyed, which results in prices plummeting and people being laid off and all of that. So if I'm understanding you correctly, John, this is not a crisis of overproduction, but one of insufficient production.
That's right.
But is that really the case? I have a niece who lives in Warren, Ohio. And she said the other day she went to the supermarket, to Giant Eagle, and a dozen eggs cost $7. So given the rise in prices, which is exactly what you're saying, Kate, people wouldn't demand be cut back.
Well, it would have been, except during the pandemic, there was a really large amount of cash that was put into people's pockets, okay, to protect them from the pandemic. And there's still bank accounts are still about they're still big by compared with, for example, right before the Great Recession. People got a
Big,
lot
you
of money.
know,
They got a lot of money. The average American, the average amount of money in bank accounts is still way up, and people are spending it down. They haven't spent it down yet.
I got a wealth management. Speaking of bank account, I got a wealth management ad from Chase in my inbox the other day, and I was like, "What are you talking about? Have you seen my bank balance? What wealth?
Oh
You're
my!
not managing it well enough, Joe. You just need to manage it better.
Ain't nothing to manage.
Yeah,
You got to
Nothing
pay a wealth
to
manager to help you get
manage.
more money.
you're way below median. You know.
How high is unemployment going to go up? That's my question. Because if with this, the Fed wants to do it, they are pushing it. They want the workers to pay as usual. Have
Yep.
mercy. How uh, how high is it going to go? Anybody? 5%, 4%, 7%? Hard to predict.
Yeah.
Anybody know? Let's see. Big tech layoffs 2022. Meta 11,000. Apple, is it? No, it's Facebook. Amazon 10,000. Google 10,000.
Google's been
Twitter
Right.
revised
almost
upward to 12.
4,000. Huh?
Google's up to 12. They just announced, or
Google's up
Alphabet.
to 12. I guess that depends on how low you are in the overall scheme of things. Predictions. John Case.
I'm not gonna. I have no idea. But the problem is that once it goes into recession, you're assuming that it's a normal kind of so-called normal kind of recession, like Scott was referring to. But it might not. There's a lot of aspects of this that are very difficult to predict. The political dysfunction in Congress and in the government is means that whatever happens, your ability to recover is becoming more constrained and more limited. That there's more systematic conflicts here going on than cyclical ones, and that's a whole subject in itself. But very hard to predict what the number will be. I don't know.
You, I was thinking about that this morning because all of these little remedies that they're putting forward, it's not just the political division, it's the overall objective and political situation and the balance of forces and all of that. But it's like putting a band aid on cancer, and it seems to me like I'm worried that we're going to reach a breaking point, and all hell's going to break loose, you know?
Yeah.
That's my concern. What do you do when all hell breaks loose? I'm not going to ask anybody to answer that question. It's a rhetorical question, but it's a very serious situation.
Rosanna's
And
California.
huh?
Well, California's kind of having a disaster. Rosanna's seeing what happens, I guess, during that. So,
And on these tech layoffs, there's another point as well that I think is important to make. So if you look at the way education policy is crafted and the whole notion of job readiness, preparing students for careers, one of the big things has been, oh, we got to double down on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, I guess it is. And ever since I was a kid, really, the running line has been, oh, learn that stuff, learn tech, learn computers. That's where the jobs are. That's the key to a steady job. That's how you prepare yourself to have a prosperous life. But that's not true. I mean, there's nothing that you can do as a working class person that is going to that is going to guarantee you a prosperous future, that's going to make you that's going to keep you safe from the predations of capital. You know, all of these workers that are being laid off, or the majority of them, are people who have done, in fact, in every situation of layoffs, the majority of people that get laid off are the people who've played by the rules, right? Done, you know, made all the right decisions, and it doesn't protect you. So we have to get rid of this idea, I think, that it's somehow on students to make the right choices and prepare themselves for jobs that are just going to be, you know, subject to the same kind of insecurity and precarity and exploitation as everybody else in the
There's
workforce.
no immunization against the virus of capitalism. I mean, that's, you know, short of social revolution, Rosanna. That's why we need a social revolution. But we got this problem because the fascist right has an iron grip on the Supreme Court. They got a grip. It's not so iron, but it's the majority here I'm speaking about in the House. And by the way, I think that I was reading the other day that they have something like 27 states around the country. That number may be off a little bit, where the right wing control the governorships and both houses, both legislatures, which puts them in a really strong position. You know, in fact, our friend Max Elbaum said that they're even stronger now than they were in 2020. You know, politically. You know, in terms of and Rosanna, that's a very dangerous situation. I don't know. You know,
It is a dangerous situation, but I think we have to keep remembering that we still have the ultimate power. Working people still have the ultimate power. And what we need to do is unite and organize together against all of these, because there's less of them and there's a lot more of us, and needing the need to band together or organize the fight back is what's going to win and stop them. We've seen it, we've seen traces of it, so I think it's, we can't forget that we still have the power, the ultimate power.
and part of that has to be build a mass movement for peace. Part of that fight back.
Right.
And part of that is going to be addressing the issue of nuclear weapons. You know, we cut our teeth back in the day on the fight against nuclear weapons, you know, particularly in the 80s when the United States was trying to put Pershing II and cruise missiles, medium range nuclear weapons in Europe, and there were all those big, 1,000,000 people marched on New York City, Central Park, June 12th. Y'all remember that? Guy, I'm sure you don't remember. You were just a baby in your mama's arms back then. And, you know, but now nobody talks about we better start talking about it. All of this military buildup, you know who it's directed against, Scott? China.
Yeah.
China. And a woman who was the head of one of those nuclear disarmament groups resigned recently. She's going to do other work, but it whether she's there or not, it begs the question of the need for us to develop a mass peace movement, and we're going to hold a conference of party activists this year to begin thinking through what specific steps can be taken to re-energizing the peace movement. Because what's happening right now, it ain't getting it. Not
Well, yeah, the administration and the U.S. ruling class as a whole has really been ramping up the level of its attacks on China, both sort of ideologically and rhetorically in the main newspapers, and also, militarily in terms of strategy. Everything is being reorganized in terms of a great power confrontation, primarily with China. Um, and this is really dangerous because, in the first place, there's no such thing as a green war. When the need for movement towards sustainability, toward lowering our production of fossil of greenhouse gases is increasing, we're moving into a much more aggressive position, which is going to result in backsliding, even from where we are, even from the failure to meet the ecological goals that we've set. We're gonna slip further backwards, and that's in addition to the other dangers of nuclear war, of just displacement of people. War is the worst case scenario in just about every instance. Um, and yeah, and the United States has to be the leader in the nuclear disarmament movement. We're the only country to have used nuclear weapons as an act of war. And so we should be the first country to, even if it's unilaterally, give them up. Um, it's
That's
on
very
us.
true. Very, very true. Rosanna, I saw the other day that the inventory of nuclear weapons it's dropped. It used to be 20 years ago there were 30,000, and this was reported kind of factually, but without context. And now it's 10,000, and they said, "Oh, this is a great thing. Oh, well, isn't that wonderful? We reduced it by almost 2/3." But I was like, "Are you kidding me? I mean, really?" Because the 10,000 weapons that they have now are 30 times more powerful than the 30,000 combined. I may be exaggerating a little bit, but not by much. So, building, Rosanna, that kind of uh, greater consciousness in the party and beyond around the need for the fight for peace and taking some practical steps is going to be a big challenge before us. I wonder what kind of practical steps can we take? And maybe it's a little bit about how we imagine the fight for peace.
Yeah, I think, any step towards peace is going to be a good step. And I think, we've got to think through really those 10,000 warheads. What good are they? They're not keeping peace in anywhere. We're still at wars, and then people are frightened because they're not sure what crazy person's going to hit that button, if at all. And it really doesn't even benefit the capitalists because they're not going to make any profit. They're going to die just like the rest of us. So but it's talking about a peaceful world can bring so much more love and joy and happiness that we all yearn to have. The tranquility of having a livable wage and food and even the basic necessities, shelter, things like that. So it's not just about the nuclear arms, and it's not just about um, fighting for peace, but it's really fighting for the whole of humanity on so many different levels.
Fighting for the whole of humanity. That's the ticket. Because human civilization is at stake. And what's the good of nuclear weapons when you can't use them? Because a nuclear conflagration will end life as we know it on the planet. I keep saying only the roaches will survive. You know. So if you want to be a roach, a flying one, and they do fly, you know, start a nuclear war. Let's move to our discussion, our mailbag, the mailbag of the week. Uh, I think it's about disabled right. Hey, Communist Party, how come y'all don't address disabled rights. Anybody want to take a shot at it? It's a big issue. Do you know that the largest minority in this country are disabled people? And that disabled people are paid sub-minimum wages? Many of us are
So,
paid. Scott?
I think one thing that it's important to point out about disabilities is that when we talk about disability, we're usually talking about a mismatch. There are kind of two components, right? There's the component that's part of someone's identity. The way their brain is set up, the way their body works. That's a question of identity. And the other end is a question of society. And in many cases, the problem is on the social end, right? That certain identities, certain forms of neurodivergence, certain kinds of bodies are not valued, are not welcomed in our society, and are not welcomed precisely because they are not as easily or as exploitable in the same way that others are. So a lot of this question of disability rights is really, really important, whether it's, as Joe said, wages or standards in building to make sure they're accessible, standards in design of everything to it's a question of do we proceed on the basis of equality, on the idea that we all do better when everyone is included and everyone is welcomed, or are we going to be content with a society that writes off people?
I think that it's not completely true that we don't address disabled rights. We do. We support disabled rights, but I think we got a long way to go, and it's going to be a little bit of a difficult road to hoe, because you see the disabled rights is part of the fight for democracy, and we have been historically strong in certain aspects of the fight for democracy and equal rights. When I say democracy, I mean equal rights around everything: voting, freedom of speech, but also housing, medical care, so on and so forth, jobs, and we haven't jumped into this in a full way. And I think that that's one of the issues that the convention is going to have to address. I know that the first response from some of us will be, we need to set up a commission to address it. And we do. But in order to have a commission, and what we call commissions, y'all, you're not in the party, you don't know, that's a national collective party activists who meet and who focus on study, make recommendations, take initiative on different issues. But in order to have a commission, you got to have an anchor. Some person has to, or persons have to be willing to lead it. So we acknowledge that this is a really important issue. Again, the majority of the largest minority. We are the largest minority in the country, bar none. And it's a issue which is crying out for more attention. So thank the writer for asking the question, and we're going to have to pay more attention to it going forward. Well, I think that does it. Until next week, stay strong. John Case, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe. Stay in the fight, and we'll see everybody next week. Take care.
Bye, everybody.